Welcome, everybody, to the February 2021 and Valentine's Day Commerce Pulse Report. I'm Brian Walker. Thank you for joining us here today, live, or if you're watching on demand. I hope you're having a great day. Spring is definitely in the air here in Seattle, although the sun is not quite out. Can definitely smell spring kind of in the air, and the air is starting to soften. And I even noticed last night when I was wrapping things up before dinner that it was still light out. It was crazy. So anyway, it's kind of nice to see the weather starting to turn. I know some of you are probably happy that Valentine's Day was in the rearview mirror. So nonetheless, we're going to take a look back at some of the e-commerce results from Valentine's Day and some of the things that we can learn from that here. So, that song Donna Summer, Giorgio Moroder, of course. Was the producer and did a lot of that kind of early disco and electronica. So that's a great track. I love that old Donna Summer disco track that we were listening to. Kind of harken back a little bit to Valentine's Day. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm Brian Walker. You can see that was my hair pre-COVID. It's time for a haircut, and I'll be joined later on today by Ian Burgers as well. And Ian certainly was sporting the right tie there for Valentine's Day. So good job, Ian. Ian will join us a little later to talk about some of the search related results and looking forward to that. Those of you who aren't familiar with our Commerce Pulse reporting, and I know that we're getting a lot of registrations from people who have joined us in the past, I think it's always important just to highlight the data we're sharing here today is from Bloomreach customers. That represents now well over 500 global brands and enterprises selling through their digital channels in aggregate. Over 250 billion in annual e-commerce sales. So that's a big number. We're looking at US and Canada plus UK and Europe kind of together. We do aggregate all the data, of course, and we report it out in those key segments you see. We won't have time today to go through every segment in detail, but if you want to see results for each of those segments for February or understand kind of year to date and that sort of thing for your own benchmarking purposes or whatnot, you can check out what we post online or get in touch with us there in that email address you see at the bottom if you're after any of that information, that data. Before we get into the Valentine's Day results, I thought we would first just sort of look at February 2021 kind of in kind of top level. Look at some of the regional results first from North America. You can see that it was a very strong month in North America. Again, with overall traffic to North American, US, and Canadian sites up 55.37% year over year. It's a very strong result. Now, of course, we're essentially turning the clock over on COVID. Some would argue that the impact of COVID wasn't really felt in February 2020. You'll see later on in our search results, that's not necessarily true. And I can tell you that living in Seattle in February 2020, we were already starting to feel the impact and we were starting to make different decisions about what we were doing. As you know, Seattle was one of the first North American cities where cases were first at least uncovered and known about. Certainly, there's now evidence that may have been spreading across North America previous to that, but nonetheless, that's really when it started hitting our radar, right? So it is still relevant to kind of think about that in the back of our head, although I think it's true that it was really March 2020 when we started to see a meaningful impact and changes in our behaviors, including shopping behaviors. I think it's also important to note always the AOS and conversion rate changes. You can see AOS up 17.34% year over year. So not only are more people visiting sites and overall sales are up, they're buying larger basket sizes by a large degree. So up 17.34%, slightly above the year-to-date average thus far this year. You can also see that it did drop a little bit month over month from January, results to February. I think that's seasonal. January is often still a month where people are converting on gift cards and still kind of, in a sense, wrapping up holiday shopping or looking for clearance goods and so forth. So it's natural that we would see a little bit of a drop off month over month from January to February. Still very, very strong results in North America. Switching over to UK and Europe, you can see really a very strong month for UK and Europe here, with sales growing month over month, unlike North America, up 13.2% month over month, and up 53.17% year over year. Very, very strong result. And I think it's important to reflect back that there was a period of time in summer and early fall of last year, and really leading up into holiday, where the UK and Europe was really struggling to, in a sense, deliver the same kind of numbers we were seeing in North America. And now, in a sense, the tables have kind of turned. Now we see that a result like up 53.17%. That's a remarkable number, and obviously outpacing North America. And that's something to really note, and I think it's very interesting. On the flip side, average order size is actually down 4.63%, but conversion rate up dramatically, up 20.34%. So some really interesting numbers, but I think it's really encouraging, and I think it may be a reflection of the ongoing situation with the pandemic. But it's also potentially a reflection of sort of a post-Brexit UK consumer sentiment as well, kicking into gear. And I think, late last year, there was still a lot of uncertainty in the UK market in particular. And I think this must be in part related to that being a bit in the rearview mirror as well. So I think that's really interesting. So I wanted to set the stage a little bit now as we head into our Valentine's Day recap and we kind of look at some of the results. I think what's really interesting here is to see the impact of merchandising with content, with storytelling, with inspiration. And we saw a 62% year over year increase in traffic to those kinds of pages. New to 2021, some of the key things that really jumped out: Valentine's Day at home, Valentine's Day ideas with family, cooking for Valentine's Day, and Valentine's Day care packages. Obviously, people were looking to express their love and care for their loved ones, for their families and close friends, but they needed to do it differently this year. And so these kinds of merchandising pages, combining content and commerce with inspiring, marketing content, giving the consumer lots of different ideas, paired with the products that they could buy to kind of follow through on that, really a tremendous impact. On the flip side, content pages that were in significant decline from 2020, party ideas, potlucks with friends, or Galentine's Day party down significantly. So, it kind of makes sense, right? Obviously, we were looking to go at this differently this year because we really had no choice. So it's kind of interesting to see that play out in these numbers. And it'll be interesting to see, obviously, what lies ahead next year. Hopefully we're in a little different situation. Top product categories by search volume: chocolates definitely jumped out, no question about it, followed by roses, gifts, cards, and rings. This is the percentage of people shopping these categories through search, right? But with almost 60% for chocolates, that's a pretty remarkable. In terms of by category, cards, chocolates, roses, rings, and gifts really led the way. So cards made in a sense, a big comeback, I think, this year, as people wanted to express themselves with something tangible. We kind of want to move away maybe from digital a little bit here and express ourselves with a card. So that's a pretty significant increase at 134% year over year, along with things like chocolates and roses. Rings at plus 56%. Let's look at that a little bit here. If we look at top categories by revenue, again, cards, rings, and roses really with significant increases. Chocolate and gifts, obviously significant as well. You have to kind of wonder if commitment was kind of in the air this year. People, have. I know quite a few of my younger family members who got engaged this year, and I think it's maybe a sign of the time. I think they call them turbo romances for some reason. These are, in a sense, kind of brought on by kind of a change in how we're living, and of course, a lot of couples who maybe had wedding plans in the future moved those plans up in part because of COVID and how they had to work together to get through it. And so congratulations to all those of you got engaged yourself. Congratulations. So I think it's very interesting to see this. And of course, the percentage by revenue, you can see the gifts actually led there. So that's an interesting result to note. Ian, I want to call you in here to talk about the top Valentine search terms. Welcome.
Yeah, let's have a look at that. Thanks, Brian. So Brian already mentioned it previously, but chocolates and flowers were really, really popular this year. But it also means that if you did buy chocolates and flowers, you might need to, second guess next year. You might need to get a bit more creative because a lot of people, they did that as well.
Well, my advice there, Ian, would be you still need to get the chocolate and the flowers, but maybe not in there.
Something additional. Yeah, I like that, Brian. Yeah, that's a good idea. One other thing that I found really interesting from this data is that, since the start of the pandemic, we consistently see that loungewear is really popular among consumers. So in December, we saw that, Christmas pajamas was one of really a top search term back then. And this trend is still here during Valentine's Day, where we see Valentine's Day pajamas as one of the top search terms. So with Easter coming up, if you sell loungewear, it might be a good idea to add Easter pajamas to your assortment.
Yeah, there might be a few pajamas with rabbit ears attached as well. We'll see.
Exactly. All right, so let's have a look at how people shopped during this Valentine's Day. So on the left, we see a stacked bar chart for the traffic, which is split by device. And from this, it instantly becomes clear that mobile is, really dominating for how people, visit websites this year. At the same time, on the right, we see a bit of a different story. On the right, we see a stacked bar chart for the revenue split by device. And here we really see that desktop is still more popular. And I think it really tells us that while people might be browsing on their phone, they still prefer to make the purchase on their desktop. So desktop is still really driving a lot of the revenue. Another interesting thing is in 2020, really when the pandemic started, we see that desktop made a bit of an increase for the revenue. So it went from 54% in 2019 to 60% in 2020. But I think now, a year later, people have gotten maybe a bit more used to buying on their phone. We see it going down a bit again. So we're back to 53%.
Very interesting to see this delta between traffic and sales by device. That's very, very interesting and important, I think, for everyone to kind of remember. And when they think about their strategy related to these different platforms. Great, thank you, Ian, so much. So how about let's just kind of recap here some key takeaways. No question that shoppable content, ways to engage customers, to give them some inspiration, paid big dividends for those who leaned into it. And obviously this is just something, whether or not Valentine's Day is important to your business or not, something to really think about and take away as digital really becomes your primary way of marketing and merchandising to customers, right? You think about all the effort you may have taken in other channels, right, to create a great, inspiring environment for the customer. Obviously that you need to think about how to replicate that, and customers are responding to that kind of thing online. Think about how, helping a customer find inspiration and find gifts that are meaningful, right? Browsable, interactive ways for someone to find something that's thoughtful and meaningful, right? That's really the key point of Valentine's Day, right? Is to show that you were thoughtful and that you put something, you put your mind to finding something important for those that you care about. And it can be hard. It can be hard to do that in an online environment, to know what specifically to browse to or search for, et cetera. And so gift finders can be a really valuable tool. And obviously, there's some really great ways to implement that as well in a mobile type of an environment. You need to make sure that you have dynamic inventory and curbside pickup incorporated into that shopping experience, especially for all those people who are doing last minute Valentine's Day shopping. But certainly, this is something that's going to become a mainstream long-term trend that we need to really think about, especially if you have physical stores, right? How do you link these channels together very, very tightly? And certainly those kinds of capabilities, making sure that people are finding products that they can actually pick up in their local store, and that the inventory is dynamic. So you're not inspiring them to buy something that is now out of stock. And then obviously focus on making that mobile commerce shopping journey better, right? Think about things like responsive single page applications. Think about ways to really improve that. Think about easy checkout services to help streamline that. You saw that delta between traffic and purchasing. Part of that is probably some friction inside your mobile shopping experience that you should really pay significant attention to, and make sure that you have sites and experiences that are well suited to a mobile experience, and obviously can also support a desktop experience as well. It's not going away. So let's look back up a little bit, change it a little bit up here, and we're going to look now at February 2021 across a couple of key segments, and you'll see some of these Valentine's Day themes and trends probably come to play. First, looking at grocery, very strong month, up 94.14%. Again, we were talking about that annualization. This is probably the last month in 2021 where we will not be comping 2020 numbers as well. So obviously with grocery and online grocery, we started to see that ramp really kicking into gear in March last year. And so you can see 94.14% up. You can see still the importance of search in this category cannot be ignored. It's important in every category, but certainly in grocery. You can see the dramatic jump in search traffic, double the overall traffic increase, and obviously sales up 91.95%. Average order size down. I think that's a reflection of people dropping their minimums for things like delivery, as well as the fact that we are now executing with things like curbside pickup. So actually that's very natural. And on the flip side, conversion rate, again, still trending up significantly year over year, up 48.49%. Let's look at apparel. Apparel had a very solid month of February. Maybe didn't quite compete with some of the other segments, but still, traffic up 31% year over year, and overall sales up 22.73. So very solid. But you'd have to say apparel is still lagging other segments' success, and I think that's just a reflection of the fact that we only need certain kinds of apparel to execute our working from home or educating from home, athleisure and comfortable clothes. Certainly maybe still something we're thinking about. The weather's changing. We're probably thinking about warmer weather clothing as well, but it's still very casual. And obviously going into the office, going out to restaurants, going out for different entertainment, concerts, theater, et cetera, is going to change that dynamic. So there may be pent-up demand in the apparel segment as people, hopefully in the next 3 to 6 month time frame, are able to start to return to some of those activities. But there's no question that that's having an impact on the apparel segment. You do see that average order size and conversion rate also had a pretty good had a pretty good month, but you can see there was a drop from January. The luxury segment, despite the fact that we're talking about Valentine's Day, continues to struggle. Overall traffic down 1.86% year over year, sales flat, right? Which given the pandemic, I think is not a great result, obviously. But you can see conversion rate was actually up 17% year over year. So those that are coming to your site, they may be responding to lower priced items being sold, like masks, for example. And then obviously, there may be products on sale and so forth that might be depressing the top line sales number, but driving a better conversion rate. So no question the luxury segment continues to be challenged, through the pandemic. And again, we may see that really rebound quickly post-pandemic as there may be some pent-up demand. And we've seen that in previous recessions as well, that segments like luxury tend to bounce back pretty strong, but we're still not there yet, obviously. Let's see, let's advance here. One more segment I think to look at here would be home furnishings, which continues to be a remarkable story. But it's very interesting to see the home furnishings results. Traffic up 133% year over year, sales up more modestly at 29%. And that's really a reflection of the conversion rate, which is down significantly. And this, I think, continues to indicate that there are out of stocks, there are issues with the products that people are looking to buy. That's a pretty dramatic drop, and it can really only be explained by out of stocks and or supply chain challenges in some of these categories. So I think that's another interesting story to see. So while very strong traffic growth, decent sales growth, there's a lot being left on the table in the home furnishings and housewares category. Let's look quickly at search terms before we wrap up here today. Ian, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So I'll quickly dive into the top search term data for February 2021. There's a lot happening on this slide, but basically on the right, we see all the search term data. And in the very right column, we see the February 2021 search term data. In the middle, we see the month before that, so the January 2021 search term data. And in the very left column, we see February 2020 search term data. So that's 1 year before. And I think one of the first interesting things to notice is the appearance of the heater and generator search terms. So there were a lot of storms. There was a lot of horrible winter weather in February that I think a lot of people were really struggling with, which is why we are seeing those search terms pop up. I think another interesting thing to see here is that from our data going back to February 2020, we see that in that month, 1 year ago, the first COVID-related search terms were starting to make an entrance. So back in February 2020, people started to search for masks, hand sanitizer, and toilet paper. And I think it's interesting to see that, that was the first month that masks were the #1 search term. And 1 year later, February 2021, it's still the #1 search term. I think that really gives some perspective almost on how long the pandemic has already, been affecting how people shop. The last interesting thing that we noticed from the search term data is the seasonal related items that people were shopping for. And then I think especially the Easter search term is interesting. So even though it was February with Valentine's Day, people were already shopping for Easter related items.
Fantastic.
Over to you, Brian.
Thank you. Super interesting to see that in February 2020, like I was saying earlier, even though many, in the US and in Europe want to think about March as really the beginning, already in February, people were, in a sense, kind of scrambling online to look for these COVID-related items, even before the supply chain was able to really adapt. And of course, we continue to see it, as Ian already shared. So that is very, very interesting. And that leads me to what we're going to be covering next month on the Commerce Pulse. Next month, we are going to be looking back at sort of the year of COVID in a sense, what we can sort of see in all of our data, reflecting on this tremendous sort of transformation and how all of us have lived our lives and shopped, obviously. And then, but I think more importantly, even from reflecting back and looking at the data, I think we need to really think about what's next, right? What can we expect in the balance of 2021 as we start to annualize these numbers, as we start to think about all these different shopping habits that are now kind of firmly cemented in how we go about life, even as hopefully in the not too distant future, we're starting to kind of adapt to a vaccinated herd immunity post-pandemic way of life. Hopefully, right? I think we're all anxious to see that coming. And depending on where you live, I recognize that your situation can be very different with access to the vaccine and so forth. So obviously, it's somewhat dependent on regions and so forth. But we'll be looking at that closely next month. So we'd love to have you join us next month as we really dig deep, and we'll have some guests on as well to help us process it and have a discussion about what it means. If you're looking for more data from Commerce Pulse, including some of the segments we didn't have time to highlight today, this is all up on our site. Maybe not right this moment, but very soon, since the data is very fresh, we'll have the ability for you to dig in and kind of explore some of this information. And obviously, you can see previous months' reports and data there as well. So I encourage you to check that out if you're looking for benchmarking information or trying to understand what's happening. And then one last plug. Reminder, we do also have a podcast that I host. Last month's episode, I had an opportunity to talk to Brent Bellum, CEO of BigCommerce. Great conversation about the transformation that's happened with BigCommerce as they moved from really an SMB-focused solution to now one that's serving larger enterprise with some obviously significant investments in their technology. Fascinating conversation with Brent. I think you'd really enjoy it. We have quite a few episodes up with thought leaders across B2B and B2C technology and so forth. Love for you to check that out. You can get to the link there as well. It's also available on all the major podcast platforms. With that, I want to thank you so much for your time today, or if you're on demand, thank you for spending time with us that way as well. I want to thank you for your time and be well. And here's to good business. Thank you.